once in a while, you meet someone who inspires you because they are so courageous, outspoken, visible, vulnerable, and yet also graceful and cool as a human and about their work. Anna DeShawn is that woman for me. She owns multiple businesses, yet is as down to earth as you can get. And my favorite thing, Anna has managed to marry both her passion and her purpose by sharing stories, amplifying issues and voices, and creating platforms for Black and Brown LGBTQIA+ people. She saw a need, started doing work to provide within that gap, and continues to hold space for the Black and Brown LGBTQ community. Anna, I'm so glad to have you here with me today.
Hey, let's go. Happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And Anna, let's just start out with hearing your unique definition of abundance.
My unique definition, I don't know if it's unique, but I feel like when I think of abundance, I'm thinking about enough. Like there is enough. And I think for so many, or when I came to understand what abundance was, there was this idea that there's this overflow or that there's this exceeding, what you may need. And I don't know today if that's how I look at abundance. I feel like I look at it as enough for me, enough for my family, enough for my goals in all the ways and in all the places that matter, whether it's my joy, my finances, my work, that there's enough, because I do believe that there is enough for all of us. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe not excess for all of us, but enough for all of us is like a great equalizing type of concept. I really appreciate that. So talk to me a little bit about building your business. I know it's been quite a journey. You've got a few things going on. Like when I initially looked you up and met you months ago, I was like, okay, wait, does she own an app or is she a podcaster or what? Just trying to figure like it's all the things. So share how this concept of enough has like helped you segue and build this business.
At the heart of it, Virginia, I want to tell our stories. I want to tell the stories that I think deserve to be heard. I care deeply about my communities, Black folks, Black queer folks, Black queer women in particular. And I think we have so much to share with the world, and we often don't have a platform to do it. And so I feel called to share our stories in that way. And so that has manifested in a lot of ways. I started a radio station, started interviewing folks in November of 2009, and it was a passion project. I was in corporate, so I did it on the sides and on the weekends. People thought I was doing it full time, and I was not. And when I quit corporate 3 years ago to go out here full time, it was because I also had an idea for the podcasting space, which was to create a platform where we could discover, listen, and support the best Black and Brown podcasts out here, because I couldn't find Black and Brown pods and I couldn't find the ones I wanted to listen to, and discoverability in that way was really hard. And I wanted to solve that problem. And so we created a company called The Cube, Qube, and we produce podcasts over there as well. And so my desire to tell stories has manifested in lots of different ways. And, to combat the whole idea, you build it and they will come. It's more like you build it and you better go find your people. And so at every stage, I'm also looking to find my people. And that's where the personal brand comes in. That's where me being a podcaster comes in. That's where me being a radio personality comes in, because if I can build these things, but if I am not reaching the people with these things, then the successes and my goals are not being met. So, when I talk to people, they choose what relates most to them, and I'm good with that. It can be a lot to take in, but I think when people see how they have shown up in the world, these businesses, they can see how they all tie in together so well. And I hope that the mission and the vision for them is very clear as well.
Yeah.
That our humanity matters.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for stepping forward. I don't think there's anyone else that I know. Maybe there are people out there that are stepping forward, focused on sharing Black and brown, queer women's voices, right? So I appreciate you doing that for everyone. Talk to me a little bit about any hesitance or fear that you may have had or that you still even face along the way. I know sometimes you're reporting on stories that aren't fun, for lack of a better term, right? And so to me, I watch you do that and I think, dang, like she's really doing the thing. She's really stepping out and helping share and amplify these important pieces. To me, I tend to internalize those things a bit too much, and I'll end up overthinking about them and dreaming about them and getting so wrapped up in some of those stories. And so I kind of have to set boundaries for myself around like the news and current events. So tell me how you've navigated some of that.
It's hard. So I'm with you. Okay.
I'm glad I'm not alone.
You are not alone, and with the stories that I tell and the people I want to share stories about, the trolls are busy. So as I sit here with you right now, the trolls have been driving me crazy today on my YouTube channel, right? And that is exhausting. But you put yourself out here and this is what happens when we talk about the internet. I think one of the things I choose to do, though, is to choose courage and vulnerability, which are two things that are very hard to choose. And when I choose to choose them, because sometimes you ain't got the energy, okay? It's not an everyday thing, okay? But when you make the decision, I think about my why, and I think about my community that supports me. And I think about the people who also believe in the work that I'm doing and who depend on my platform to help get the word out. And that has always been the goal, is to be a place where people can come to us and we can amplify a good thing, right? That deserves to be seen and heard. And so it is in that I center and I find the courage to be vulnerable once again out here in the world because it's needed, right? Because it's needed. So no, it sucks. It is very hard. I wish maybe I had a easier call, or I could talk about bears all day. I wish I was passionate about something else sometimes, but I am passionate about people, and I am probably too empathetic at times. But it is, I don't know, it's just what I'm called to do. So somehow I muster up the courage every day to do something. But yeah, no, I'm with you. It is hard. I'm constantly releasing this people pleaser part of me. And I can't wait till I've completely released it. And I can just stand. I'm calling her my mentor, Miss Connie Lindsay. She reminds me that I need to cover all the ground I stand on. And it is that also that reminds me that, you have to do this. Like, this is what you're called to do. And I can cover all the ground I stand on. And I feel like I'm called to do that. So people, the call, they give me the courage to be vulnerable again out here on the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and do you ever kind of catch yourself? Because I think that's every business owner's fear. And you in particular, I think, are maybe more at risk for trolls or something like that. Like, I don't know what it is, but some messages, some industries, some people in general, depending on their platform, tend to get more reactions from others, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I will catch myself even in a spin And the instinct is to like reply or do whatever to like, what's actually happening is we're just like continuously poking the bear, I guess. And it's really, really hard to shift and say like, hold on, let me step back. Like, what are my top 3 most important things I need to do today? And like shift back into that productive space. Maybe like, what is the thing I need to do that will help move my goals forward? What is like a revenue generating thing I can do? Like, how do you manage that?
It's hard. How do I manage? I don't know, Virginia. To your point though, I have prayer and meditation corner that grounds me in moments like that. I'll be visiting it again today. Yes. Today is one of those days. Yes. I think one thing is clear for me on this entrepreneurial journey that is definitely a roller coaster ride, is that focus and discipline are probably 2 of the most important things you can have in this work, because the way that things ebb and flow, right? You have to be able to ebb and flow with them while remembering your why and staying focused and staying disciplined in the work. And when I say that, I mean, it's very easy to get caught up with these trolls and the bots and try to defend yourself. And I've said what I said.
Yeah.
And that is exactly how I felt.
I said, I meant what I said, and I'm not going to unsay it.
And I'm not going to unsay it. And the change that we are often looking for is not going to come on the internet, right? I think it's also this understanding from me that I find change happens in relationship with other people, right? People are changed when someone close to them has helped them to change because they love them, because they care for them, because they trust them. Yeah. And so, one example I use for this is cancer diagnoses, right? My mom is a breast cancer survivor. So many of us have family members who have been affected by cancer in one way or another, right? That makes us breast cancer advocates, no matter what. There's an instant empathy. There's an instant understanding. There is donations that are made. People do walks. Like, there's all these initiatives because we understand how devastating that diagnosis can be on the person and their families, right? I see that as a correlation to, for example, LGBTQ rights and transgender rights, is that when somebody in their family is queer or trans, their perspective changes. They understand the impact of that person's life and identity. There is a different level of understanding, and you choose love anyway, right? And so when I put that into context with these trolls, you just kind of let them do what they do. And you hope that the message finds the people that you're actually intending it to reach, that those in which you want to actually speak to find the message. And I think that is where we have to focus. And that's where we have to, that might be your why today, is to find your people out here in the world.
Have you ever pictured yourself hosting your own show? Maybe it's time. This show is edited and produced by podcastabundance.com. And if you like what we're doing, we'd like to do it for your business too. I'm Virginia Elder, and I've been helping independent financial service professionals launch and grow their podcasts since 2019. I coach you through branding, establishing structure and workflow, strategy, and recording your episodes. Then my team and I professionally edit your audio and video so you don't have to. We'll even write your episode descriptions and titles so that when potential customers turn to Google, your show appears in their search results. Elevate your brand's visibility, become more approachable, and attract potential clients, all with your own podcast. I'm here to hold your hand and make podcasting the exciting, up-leveling experience it should be, skirting you past the tech and software struggles. Take the first step by booking a call with me using the link in the show notes or by visiting podcastabundance.com. Now, on to the rest of the show. That is a beautiful example of the compassion comes when it gets personal, basically, is what's happening, whether it's a cancer diagnosis or, your daughter lets you know that she's queer or trans or, just something like that. Like it could be to someone else who's not exposed to it, a shock or, oh, I don't know how you're dealing with that. Or, there's like all these weird comments people make. But when it becomes personal to you, and like you said, you choose to love them anyways, it becomes a cause of your own, right? You'll go for that walk. You'll donate that money. You'll stand up for the rights. You'll do the right thing is what it really comes down to. And so again, I appreciate that you're doing that work for us.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think, as adults, we can kind of overcomplicate things, right? Children, it is very black and white, right and wrong. It is very clear. As adults, we make things very complicated and where they don't have to be. I think there's time for gray area. Absolutely. I'm a gray area person. I can usually see both sides to a situation. But then there is literally right and wrong, right? And hate is wrong. And hate shows up in a lot of different ways. And how it shows up today, people can try to make it feel like it's gray, but it's not. It's very clear, and their policies usually come along with the ride. So I think that if in your heart you are doing what you feel is right, right, and it equates to not doing harm to absolutely anybody else, then you are doing the right thing. But if any point what you do actually causes harm, then it's time to reevaluate what you're doing and how you're doing it. Because I think it's very easy for adults to overcomplicate a situation. But at the end of the day, some things are just right and some things are just wrong.
Absolutely. So pull us a little bit into your business and share about how you've created this intentionally to do the right thing, to share these stories. Maybe share a decision you had to make about a platform you were using or people on your team or in your circle. Like, how has your value of enoughness and this inclusivity that you want to see in the world helped you build?
It's been a lot of tough lessons. When I started this journey, I would have rejected the word failure as a thing. I never accepted that word. But 3 years into full-time entrepreneurship, and I understand what failure means and how it is necessary. And I won't even call it an evil thing. It's just necessary. The failures over and over again, right? They leave lessons. I was listening to Robin Roberts the other day, and she was saying how success leaves lessons. I think it's success leaves lessons, and failures leave lessons too. And if I'm talking about the Cube, when we started this journey 3 years ago, I had a very clear vision on how I thought it could scale, how I thought it could grow, what I thought was going to be our next moves. But the app didn't work. We built it, couldn't fix a bug. It didn't work. Wasted a lot of money, right? Ended up having to pivot, and it is what it is today, which is a web platform. But that is not the end vision that I have for this platform. But we had to pivot. Had to stop purging money into something that was not working and thinking about how we could be of service today, right? And it's taken a year and a half for me to really begin to delve back in and figure out what the next move is, because there's been so many changes in the podcasting space over the last 3 years. what it looked like 3 years ago is wildly, drastically different than what it looks like today. From paywalls to no paywalls, contracts to no contracts, the industry imploding, right? Not listenership, right. The industry imploding, right? And video being such a huge component today, where it wasn't 3 years ago. And so having to be okay with the constant changes that exist in business and being nimble, right? In how you approach your business and being open to how your business may show up. And I think that's why it's always so important to remember your why. Why are you doing this? What is actually the goal here? Because there's probably 50 different paths to getting there. And you thought you was on one, but Chile, you might end up on path 39,
yes.
Okay? To get to the goal of the why. And you have to be open to that. You have to be open to what that could look like. And so for me, that's been one example with the Cube. And then when it comes to the radio station, I've really just had to take somewhat of a hands-off approach when it comes to the music that's playing. I have, a couple of people who volunteer for the station, who listen to the music that people send. They like it. It goes in.
Okay.
Because what I'm clear about is that you can really truly only do one thing great at a time. And when I'm focusing on the Cube and our podcast, there just isn't energy for all the other things that come along with running, the radio station in and of itself. So it does a beautiful thing. People listen, we promote it. We play queer artists all day long. Is it what I want it to be in its fullest, greatest state? No. Is it still accomplishing a goal today? Absolutely. Yeah. We play queer music all day long. And for me in this moment, that's sufficient, and I think I have a vision. Once we get funding and find the right partners, I can bring somebody on to make the vision grow. As one person, I believe it's doing exactly what it should be doing right now in this moment, right? And so there's also been times where I've had to let people go from the team because I just can't physically sustain. At one point, I was paying people and I was going in debt to pay myself in an effort to grow, because you really cannot do any of this by yourself. But at some point, that just doesn't make any sense anymore, because nobody's going to pay back my debt but me. Like, nobody's going to be able to figure out how to get out of this but me. And so you do have to make tough decisions. You have to make tough calls. Sometimes you have to scale back. You have to reevaluate. I'm constantly reevaluating, like to the point where I'm overthinking it. But I think it's incredibly important, because things change so much and so quickly. And you might be doing one thing, but if it's too hard or something, there has to be some type of block. And sometimes we don't know what's blocking us until we sit still in silence and really think about what we can do next. So I think there's been on both sides of the businesses, and even in my personal brand and how I show up in the world, where being nimble and reevaluating and pivoting and failing have proven some of the best lessons for me to find the success that I'm actually looking for.
Yeah. Well, and I think you hit on a few really great topics without me even asking. So thank you. But yes, I too will feel like, well, didn't I learn this lesson like 2 months ago? Why is it showing up again in my life? And, I just kind of keep going back to the concept that like, you're going to learn and relearn and relearn and relearn until you're done learning that lesson. Then it will go away. So did you actually learn it the first time? No, that's why it's back in your life. Mm-hmm. And so I am like telling myself that all the time. It's really tough to face that and say, well, I did think I learned it, but it's here again. So clearly I didn't get the message enough. And, let me relearn this. The other thing was just one person cannot do it all. Like, we are truly a community-based species that needs each other. Even when we have this big vision, if you look at that big vision and go, yeah, I can totally do that all myself, well, then it's not big enough. And so we need people to help us bring whatever that vision is to fruition. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking, dang, how do you do all this? How do you do this radio show and your show and the app? And, like you said, now it's on the web versus an app. But still, to me, I've never built an app. I don't know what that's like. And so I'm thinking, dang, how did you do all this? And you just told us, like, you're not doing it all yourself. You have gone through various versions of what a team might look like. You have people that are volunteering to help. You have other like paid situations where people have been helping you. So thank you for kind of just being real about how you're building this and the lessons that you've been learning, because they are tough no matter what industry we're in. Let's talk a bit about the podcast industry. You brought that up a little while ago. I, in my business, have even had to shift because I started out only editing audio. That was all I knew how to do. And when it came to video, I could do enough to be dangerous. I'm still in that boat. But that shift in the industry made it to where I even had to really take a step back and say, all right, what are we doing? Because there were people in the industry that I knew that were like doubling down, like, no, we do audio only. And then, I'm seeing this opportunity with video. And so I really had to think through that. Like, what is this going to look like? I cannot be the jack of all trades. What am I going to do? What are the steps forward? And you mentioned the podcast industry imploding. I mean, we no longer have Stitcher. We no longer have Google Podcasts. I think Google's been really smart as far as leaning all into YouTube and pulling in the RSS feed feature. And if we are talking French to anybody listening, it's just podcast lingo. And when you get into actually launching your podcast, you'll know exactly what an RSS feed is. But so talk to me about like your journey in that. I think you may be in this industry, especially in the radio industry, longer than I have. I got in the industry in 2019. So you have several years on me. So talk to me about the growth and changes and what you've seen. Do you remember a moment that you had to really navigate what the industry was doing?
Oh, every moment. Because with the internet, right? With internet and technology, every moment has to be navigated.
It's true.
In 2009, when I wanted to tell queer stories and interview queer folk and reach people, it was really the beginnings of when video, audio, and the internet were meeting on a major level, right? And we started off on Blog Talk Radio. And I was actually looking at it the other day because I was preparing for a story I was going to tell, and I wanted to pull some archives from Blog Talk Radio. And it was saying like 14, 15 years ago. And I was just like, my word. But it started on I started on Blog Talk Radio. So this was a place where you could have call-ins and people could chat with you live and you could do a live show, and it had an RSS feed associated to it. So we always had a podcast, quote unquote, with it. And I wanted to have a radio station, but at that time, there wasn't a platform. Tech hadn't come so far where I could do that natively from my house. Mm-hmm. The opportunities was you had to have a studio, right? They were building them for radio stations to go online, not for independent creators to be online. So Blog Talk Radio was my next choice. But then as time went on, technology caught up with itself, and then we could have radio stations that we could program from our homes, right? And we could pay ASCAP and we could pay BMI for the rights to play this music. And we could have our own independent radio stations. And when that happened, I switched. I was like, perfect, finally, right? And even then the platforms got better. And so I switched again. I mean, there is just this constant need to stay on top of what your industry is doing. I don't care what industry it is. There is something new on the horizon, and there has to be time for you to be able to take that in and stay on the top of your game. And when we think about podcasting, to your point, and what we've discussed, audio only medium, the purists of the podcasting land will say that is always what it will be, and it will always be associated to an RSS feed, and that's fine. And as someone who wants to reach people, you have to go where the people are. If you build it, they will come is one of the biggest lies ever told. It was from a movie with ghosts. Right. Like, people, let us leave it right where it was. You build it and you got to go find your people. And, I've really learned so much from some of my LGBTQ mentors and people I look up to who have been doing LGBTQ queer community work and outreach since the 70s, since the 60s.
Wow.
And I see how they use Facebook now.
Okay.
Right? And they're on Instagram and they're on TikTok and they are still choosing to reach because they want to reach people. Mm-hmm. And so they continue to adapt. And I learned so much from them. And I hope that I can be like them. That I too can be adaptable to meet the people where they are. Recently with YouTube's investment into podcasting, it really is a game changer for everybody. And you can't deny the biggest search engine on the planet. Holding on to your, moral high ground about RSS feeds. I mean, you can hold on to it if you want to, okay? And if you have a desire to reach people in different ways, to meet people where they are, you have to go where they are. And I recently started making videos for YouTube specifically, not just my podcast uploading there with my feed updates, and I can't deny that we're growing there, right? That we have listens there, that it's important to have a presence there. And I'm sure eventually there'll be another platform, the Cube, right? Where I'm hoping that people will want to distribute there, right? Sure. And I think being adaptable and nimble is just so incredibly important because you don't want to be left behind. And I think we can look at probably plenty of businesses that we've known over the years where you thought they had all the hope in the world, but they didn't adapt. They weren't nimble. They weren't looking at the trends of where things were going. I mean, right? 3 years ago, we thought AI would have such an impact that it does today. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Autocorrect, fine. Siri, okay. But, a Chat GPT, a Gemini, right? No one saw that coming. This is a huge impact across everybody's industry. So I think it's important for us to be adaptable. I think it's important for us to find our people. And it's important for us not to be so, what's the good word? Hell-bent. Sound like something my mama would say. Not to be so hell-bent on what you've always done, but thinking about what could I be doing to continue to reach my goal. Yeah. Right.
I love that shift that you're sharing with us is like, go back to your goals. If your goal is to reach people with your message, which I think anybody that launches a podcast, that kind of is their goal. It may be a certain community or not, but if that's your end all be all game, why would you limit yourself to what was working or what was cool last year or what the platform was, right? Because I'm guilty of that. Like TikTok came out and I was like, I'm not adopting another platform. I am not dancing. I am not. and I have since opened an account. All I do is like double post the same reels that are going on Instagram. Like it's really not a TikTok focused strategy at all. But I did end up opening an account and trying not to be that stickler. But I think we all do that in some way, shape, or form, whether it's with a new, like think of like a financial professional or somebody, like a new law that comes out or a new percentage that's recommended to do whatever, or a new investment style. It's like this natural thing to like hold on to what we were familiar with rather than going with this new thing, right? So whether it be with our social media, with our platforms online, with the actual work we do, if you were a coach and you held on to this old way of coaching, but there's a new something that you could learn that would benefit your people, that's just us holding on to something. That's not benefiting who we are actually intending to help or reach.
Oh man, I didn't know anything about TikTok. I'm with you. I am, no matter how young I may look, okay, I'm knocking on 41. And so and I started the business, 3 years ago. I was like, I have to reach people. And TikTok was booming. I'm like, I do not dance. What am I doing here? And I went to YouTube University and just started binging videos on how business people were using the platform. And I got some tips from them. And so then I started playing around with the Instagram reels. And I was like, okay. And then I went to TikTok. I was like, oh, now I see why people use this platform, and repurposed to Instagram reels natively. And then I found my voice, right? Then I found my voice there, and I found an audience there. And now we've got, I think we've 45,000 followers now on TikTok.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
It's great. It's great. Do I want more? Absolutely. But do I have time to invest in a whole TikTok strategy? Not necessarily. Right. But is it important? It is. In my work, it is very important, right? Media doesn't happen without an audience. I can't get advertised if I don't have an audience. Right. And so for me, being on platforms like that helped me to do just that. And so I think it's worth giving something a try. Yes. Is what I typically like to tell people, because you just never know where you find your voice and where you will find your people. You just don't know. And when you find them, you build with them. I think years ago I was in I watch, read, listen to a lot of stuff. But the general gist was that if you get your first 100 fans, after that, you're good. You're set, right? And I'm always thinking about, how am I building relationship with my 100? How am I getting to my 100, right? And so for me, with our podcast, we have a paid membership called the Q Crew that starts at $5 a month, right? They get an email from me with a video, unedited video every week. And then we have a career newsletter that everybody gets as well. And eventually my videos are going to be behind the paywall, specifically for people in the Q Crew. And there's about 60-something people in the Q Crew. And so I'm constantly thinking about, how am I taking care of them outside of just my work? But how am I cultivating relationships with them? How am I taking care of them? Because if you can take care of the core people, right, then you can take care of more core people. And so that's what I'm always thinking about, is, how can I find my people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an important question for all business owners. When you think about, I'm going to move this behind a paywall, I'm going to, shoot for these numbers for this sponsorship, I think a lot of that movement is foreign to a lot of people when they think well, aren't podcasts free? But then there's these other paid podcasts. Again, going back to the fact that the industry has morphed completely within the past few years. Yeah. How have you navigated and figured out how to do some of that stuff? Did you literally YouTube it and learn on the fly? I respect so much what you did with TikTok. I was let me learn about this instead of shying away and being afraid and refusing to do it. Let me see how business people are using this. So great idea with TikTok. Thank you. But shifting into these other concepts, did you just dive in head first to various paid podcasts? How did you discover how these things work? Because I think that's really intimidating to a lot of people.
It's very intimidating. I lean on watching other people. What is your favorite creator doing that you enjoy? Right? I look at it and I say, who is it that I enjoy watching, and why do I enjoy watching them? And what would it take for me to become a financial donor or a financial supporter of their work? What would that take? And I really do think in that way. And then if it's something that I like, then is there something I can recreate in my own work and in my own business that can mirror that in my own way to bring people in? I mean, we really do have to think and put ourselves in other people's shoes. We really do have to put ourselves in other people's shoes. As creators, we have to also think like consumers, because we're consumers too. But when it comes to your own stuff, right, you're creating it. So how can we reach our target consumer and find our people. So much of it comes back to finding your people. And so when it came to the newsletter in particular, how the Q Crew was formed was very organic. It was not on a business plan at all. It was me saying something haphazardly on my podcast about wanting to go to San Francisco and cover the AIDS quilt story, because I had never seen the AIDS quilt. Very haphazard comment I made on my podcast, Queer News Podcast. Ended up, a lady hit me up on TikTok who was following me on TikTok and said, hey, I'll give you $1,000 to go. But I was looking for your video. You never made a video about it, but I'll give you $1,000 to go. And I was like, yeah, right. Whatever. I don't even know you.
Crazy.
And so my response was, send me an email. Let's talk about it. And I never thought they'd send one, but she did. She sent me an email. She said, Anna, I'm serious. I'll give you this $1,000. Then I was thinking like, well, that's cool, but that ain't going to be enough to get me from Chicago to San Francisco and stay for a week or whatever, how long I was there. And, everything that comes along with it. And then my wife was like, well, I'm sure other people would give you money.
Yeah. Put that ask out there.
You think?
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. And that was the start of the Q Crew. It was absolutely organic, straight from the audience. And that's where we started this monthly situation. And I knew at that time I didn't have the capacity to think about, this is what this group gets at $5. This is what you get at $10. This is what you get at $20. So I said, give what you can. This is what everybody's going to get.
Okay.
You're going to get an email from me with top queer news stories, a link to this week's episode, and a video from me, unedited, raw video about what's going on in my life, what's happening next, and talk about these queer stories that we're talking about on the podcast, but in a raw, unfiltered way, no editing, blah, blah, blah.
Cool.
And so that's how I approached it. I looked at what people were doing. I looked at what I could do. I found a nice balance. But now, in an effort to reach more audience, because listenership has been down this year, right? And listening has changed, and how people listen has changed, right? And so I'm like, how can I reach more people? So I opened up the newsletter. So there's now just a newsletter, and now I'm going to put my videos behind a paywall if people are interested in watching them, right? And I'm going to give more discounts. I'm going to do some other things to encourage people to join the Q Crew. But at the end of the day, I just want the message out. So I think that you begin to see organically what people are into, what they like, what they, you have to just get to know your audience. Yeah. And then you'll figure out what you can actually put behind a paywall without hindering all the other growth that you absolutely need.
Right. So I appreciate that you mentioned a few times in here about mentors, whether they know they are your mentor or it's just somebody that you follow, that you love what they're doing, and you're kind of thinking like, well, how do I apply that to my industry? Starting a business, that was not something I was aware of to do. And I think it held me back for a long time. Now I'm very conscious of like, I need more advisors essentially in my life, whether they are a friend, a relative, some Joe on YouTube that I don't even know, but like I like what he's doing or whatever it is, right? So seeking out those mentors just as much as you're seeking your clients, consumers, people, right? Like whoever you are trying to reach. I think there's a balance to be found there. And you very beautifully articulated that during this call. So I appreciate that advice. I wanted to like pull that out, make it super obvious.
They're super important. I have big dreams and places I want to go, but you can't get there without the advice of people who have gone through it themselves, who have reached the pinnacle of their career and their life, and they have achieved their big dreams and their big goals. Because what I have also learned is that you can do all the reading you want, all the research you want. Child, there are still 1,000 things you will not know until you are in it, because you won't even know the right question to ask to get the answer that you need in that moment, because you have no idea. And so I think, I produce a podcast called Join the Breakthrough, And last season we did an episode, and it was about the need for mentors, and sponsors. And I had never heard of a sponsor before. And we all understand what mentors are. Great. We got that one down. Mentors are people you literally vent to who understand your industry, who it ain't going to go nowhere. It's going to stay between you and them, and they're going to give you some good advice, and you're going to be able to move on. It's not going to go back to your bosses or anything, but understanding that you need somebody like that in your life or to talk to. And then you need a sponsor, somebody who is in rooms that you are not in, who is going to speak your name in places, intentionally speak your name to provide you opportunities, not just work opportunities, financial opportunities, all the opportunities. And you need a sponsor in this world to have your back. And I life-changing information.
Yes. Yes.
Life-changing information.
So I hadn't heard of Ventors before. And I guess I didn't equate the name sponsor. Like in the podcast space, sponsor is always like a brand or somebody that's going to give you money. So you can advertise and fund your show, right? I had not thought about that name being equated with someone who's kind of your cheerleader. They believe in you. Like you said, they're in rooms you're not in. We all definitely need those people that may have access to different spaces and people and finances and everything that we don't, so that they are able to kind of help us up, right?
That's right.
Talk to me just a little bit more. I know you've mentioned your businesses. Share for somebody listening, thinking like, oh, this is interesting. I like Anna. I like what she's doing. Tell us more about who needs to listen to those so that they can properly refer your platforms and your shows to someone who is in your ideal audience, your ideal people, like you say.
If you care about justice, if you care about equity, if you care about humanity, then I think you can get down with any of my content. I know one thing that has surprised me. One of our Cube original podcasts is called Second Sunday. And it's about Black queer folks finding, keeping, and sometimes losing faith. And one thing that has surprised me so much about this podcast is how many straight people listen to this podcast and how much they love it. Because on some level, if you grew up in church, are in the church, so many people have felt ostracized or felt othered or felt shunned because of this, that, or the third. And at the heart of the storytelling is this deep love and appreciation for church, especially from people who grew up in it, right? And then this strong reflection on what church has done to them and how they have gotten out of it. And so there are, or stayed in it and tried to rectify it so it doesn't happen to anybody else. And that level of harm. And that is just a relatable story. And I just didn't see that coming. But I promise I am constantly and consistently surprised at how this storytelling is just resonating with so many people. And so for me, I think if you enjoy this conversation, you think I might be a cool person and that my content might be cool. If you believe in justice, if you believe in humanity, if you believe in equity, I think you can get down with any of our content that we're producing out here in the world. And so if you want to start with me, you can follow me at Anna DeShawn. If you want to start with the radio station, it's E3 Radio, and that's E, the number 3, radio across all socials. And if you're into podcasting in a very serious way, or you want to start binging, don't know where to start, you can follow us at The Cube, TheQube app, and you'll find us there. And really, truly just looking to do some good in the world.
I love that. You're just such a fun person to talk to and be in a room with. I think you have an energy about you that's empowering and fun and encouraging to all of us. So I hope they hear that in your voice. I had to look up and kind of look at some of your stuff and figure that I was like, what is this E3? What is it? What 3 E's? I don't know what's going on. So educate, empower, and entertain. And then I cued in on a few things as you were speaking. You talked about enough, and you love all these E words. So
I guess I do.
I love that. You could come up with a number more, I'm sure, but I noticed that about you. So I hope you have a big whiteboard with all your favorite E words on them.
I should do that. E3 radio, E3, the name came out of a campaign that I ran in undergrad. I ran for Student Activities Board President and had to do campaigning across the entire campus. And I ran on 3 E's: educate, empower, and enlighten the student body. And then when I wanted to start this company, I was like, I'm just use those 3 E's and substitute one for entertainment. Yeah. And they just stuck with me. So
and now you have
I'm here for the enough.
And there's another one that you mentioned earlier. It escaped me, but yeah, you got all these great E words.
I love it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here with me today and having this amazing conversation and sharing your message.
Hey, thank you for having me. I love sharing it. And if it encourages somebody, if somebody gets a nugget out of it, then well done. Yeah. We did a thing.
And again, thank you.